Right now we want to turn to another briefing. This one is underway at this very moment. This is happening in Maine. And so folks in Maine are very disturbed over what has gone down this afternoon. 3 people confirmed dead in a triple fatal shooting incident in Sabattus. So this is less than an hour from Portland, Maine. We want to bring you now to this live briefing as we're learning the very latest on this deadly shooting.
Names of individuals, witnesses, anything that we could gather that could be pertinent to this case. That way they could have an effective investigation. We'll just try to assist state police. And I also want to say that the Maine State Police Major Crimes Unit, they did an outstanding job, very professional, very compassionate, and they handled the situation very well. So thank you.
Any questions?
You mentioned the mother that was called sort of was the one to calm him down. Do we know what may have set him off? Any history of mental illness? What do we know about that from the family?
What we know from interviewing family members is that he was definitely in some type of mental health crisis that day. But in terms of some longer-term medical issues involving mental health, they weren't indicating that that was present. To what extent and how prolonged his episode was, that is not clear right now. But based on interviews we've done with the family, it doesn't appear that this is something that has been around for a while.
Is the guns he had, was any attempt made to take the guns away, or I guess there was never a court filing, but did the family try to take his, think about taking his guns away at all?
From what we know today, he had those guns when he arrived at the father's house yesterday morning. He had them with them all day. He had them when he got into his father's truck and then got into his mother's truck. And based on interviews we've had, I don't believe there was any discussion of removing those firearms or calling the police.
Someone who's acting erratically, though, do you feel like that's an indication that maybe we should...
It'd be a good time to call the police.
Were they guns that he had possessed for a long period of time, or were these guns that he may have purchased recently?
He has several firearms. Again, the investigators went to the residence and recovered more firearms at the house. We're tracking down all of those serial numbers, and we'll be able to have more definitive information as this investigation continues.
How did he get to his father's house? Did he drive himself, or was he driven?
I believe he was driven by his mother in the morning.
Okay.
And he was a functioning, normal adult. He was 29. He was living with his mother. Was this a caretaking situation in any sense? I know you said there was a history of mental struggle, but was this just a living situation?
He was 29, living with his mother, didn't have a driver's license, and I think his work history was sporadic based on interviews with family members. And that's really all we have. Doesn't appear to be someone who really went outside the area or worked outside the area. So someone very localized to Sabattus over a long period of time, most of his life.
Was there any possible history of drug use or anything of that sort?
That's something we're still looking at right now. Obviously, there will be an autopsy to determine if any of that's present. The question was about drug usage, and the autopsy should be able to determine if there's anything on board.
We had the case in Yarmouth where they, after a deadly shooting, they shot at strangers as well in Yarmouth. What does that say about why do people do that? And from your training, what do you know about people who target just strangers after doing something like that?
And that's one of the things that we do, is try and be as thorough as we can, because when you have random acts of violence, you really need to vet that out, and that is truly a random act of violence. Is there any connection between the shooter and the last 3 people that were shot? And right now we don't believe that there is any connection with them. And that isn't that common. This wasn't like a robbery or something, a crime of in the moment. This was something that you don't see very often, even though we saw it in Bowdoin just not too long ago in Maine, but it is uncommon.
Did they think he was on drugs at all?
To be determined. We haven't found any, and the family didn't indicate that he was on any.
A witness told me that it appeared other cars had stopped thinking that this car got in an accident. They were trying to help, and all of a sudden someone's fired. Were there other people, not including the 2 men in the trucks and the woman, that ended up getting shot. Were there other people who escaped his firing?
Yeah, good question. No one else that we know of, no other vehicles that we know of that were hit. Obviously, depending on how many rounds are shot, and once we get to the bottom all of that, no one has come forward that said that they had received any injuries or any damage to their vehicles. But that's a busy area, busy time of day. People are coming home from work. You can only imagine what you're rolling into. What you might think is a traffic accident because there's several vehicles off the road, and it turned out to be anything but a traffic accident.
A witness told me that he believed he heard the contents of a single clip. Does that seem accurate?
Can you describe that again?
That what he heard was like 10 shots or a single clip.
I think that was consistent with what you saw. That's what we saw at the scene when we were processing it, sure.
Do you know if it was 10? Because we've heard variations. We've heard 10 to 15.
We'll get exact numbers out once we're done processing the scene and things are processed at the crime lab. You have to know how many rounds were in a magazine and what's in the chamber and all that stuff. And our evidence response team's going through all of that stuff now, plus all the other firearms that were recovered. So in due time, I think we'll have that information for you.
Would 10 to 15 be a safe reporting number?
For shots that were fired, I think that it's going to be probably close to something like that, but an exact number I'm not going to commit to right now.
Was the location of King Street and Route 9 have any significance to the shooter, or was it just a random location that it happened?
It's close to the father's residence, and it's not too far from where the mother lives either. It looks like they were going back to the mother's house. We don't know that for certain, but that would be one of the ways they would go, depending on where they met up on Birchwood Drive. You're basically just looping right back around to that T intersection where King Street hits Route 9.
So just when things happened to
Yeah.
bubble over in the
That's
car?
that's the neighborhood, and you know what made him act at that moment. We won't know.
I think you mentioned, but I want to verify, Kay Williams, the innocent woman in the truck or car who was struck, and her car continued on. We did see a White House, which appeared another vehicle was hit. I assume her vehicle was taken away, and there was a hole in the house. Was she hit? Where was she hit? And how much distance between where she got hit and this house where she crashed?
I think multiple times the vehicle was hit. I think it was struck 4 times, and in multiple places of the vehicle. You can imagine the person shooting and a car's driving by, and she was struck and died from those injuries.
Were these guns registered in his name, and how did he get access to these, and how long ago did he buy them?
We're getting into all of that now, and we'll have that information for you shortly. He had a lot of firearms, and he had firearms back at his house as well, and we're going through all of that.
And the house where Mrs. Williams' car landed, we saw, like my reporter was saying, a damaged, I think SUV or a minivan, and plus a blue tarp over top would look to be a hole. Was that the house where Mrs. Williams' car landed?
That would be consistent with what we were dealing with, yes.
Do you have the address for that house?
I don't have that. It's right on Route 9, just in from King Street.
Anything else?
We can get that for you, though.
Is there any security cameras or footage that you've been able to?
All that we're looking at, and with everybody carrying a cell phone today, we'd certainly be interested if anyone had any footage of looking at someone's cell phone. This happened really quick, but if someone was there, we would like to speak to them, and certainly if they had any video footage. Typically, we will look for those types of things when we're processing scenes.
All right, thank you very much. We appreciate your time. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
All right, so we've been listening live here to this media briefing from authorities in Sabattus, Maine. As we mentioned a few moments ago, this is less than an hour's drive north of Portland, Maine. This is a scene photo regarding this incident that we've heard authorities discussing today. Happened yesterday afternoon. Sounds like it was pretty close towards the end of the business day, so potentially a lot of folks getting out on the roadways for a rush hour type situation when this triple shooting happened. We have some information from authorities indicating that the person who's accused of the shooting was actually in a vehicle with his mother driving. So 29-year-old man in the car with his mother when apparently he shot his mother while they were driving. The car apparently continued to travel across the roadway before it eventually came to a stop. Police say the man then got out of the vehicle and then started shooting at passing vehicles. And unfortunately, he did strike multiple people. It sounds like he hit a 53-year-old woman who happened to be driving in that area at the time. She sadly died from her injuries. And then there were two other drivers, a 19-year-old man and a 35-year-old man who just happened to as well just be driving in the area who were struck by the gunfire. It sounds like they are recovering at the hospital right now and they are expected to survive. But police say that is when the suspect here, his name is James Davis III, shot and killed himself. So